The census clerk had drawn his red strike through Widow Marna Bell's cottage when Ursuline Hart caught the corner of the sealed map. "Do not erase an occupied door," she said. Moonlight touched the cottage threshold beyond the registry window. A pale silver household mark bloomed across Marna's front door, crescent-shaped and bright, while the sealed census showed her lane nearly empty. If the count was finished, why was the house still counting itself? The clerk pulled back as if the ink had burned him. Marna Bell stood in the doorway, apron knotted around her waist, 2 grandchildren behind her skirts, and a clinic token in her palm. Their district's food cart had skipped the lane that morning. The clinic bell would not return next week because the sealed census said there were too few households to justify a nurse. King Aethelred Fane stood over the allocation table, black royal coat fastened with moon-silver clasps, blue-gray eyes ringed with pale wolf light. At 25, he looked carved from command and conscience, too beautiful for the harm lying beneath his signature. He had certified the count after Census Chancellor Godric Vale called women-led homes temporary arrangements. Now Marna's children had no bread allotment and no clinic day. Ursuline faced the king, not the clerk. "Your certification has made living residents disappear." Godric Vale folded his hands over a stack of sealed route maps. Mistress Hart mistakes a moon door reaction for census entitlement. The door shows presence, perhaps. It does not prove legal household status. "I said occupied," Ursuline answered, "not entitled." Ethelred's gaze moved from Marna's glowing door to the red strike. "What does the mark prove?" "One narrow contradiction," Ursuline said. Occupied residents at that address were omitted from the sealed census. It does not count exact residents, decide household law, calculate food, assign council seats, or name who erased the form. "Then it cannot overturn the count," Godric said. "It can stop allocation from being built on absence." The clerk's pen still hovered over the next cottage. Ursuline saw the address. Larkspur Row, home of 2 unmarried sisters who paid lamp fees under one name because the utility office refused 2 household accounts. If she let the strike fall, the lane would lose another count before anyone asked who cooked, slept, worked, birthed, and buried behind those doors. Godric turned to Aethelred. "Your Majesty certified the sealed census because famine stores cannot survive inflated households. Widows take lodgers. Unmarried women shift between kin. Female partners are often recorded under stable male households for accuracy. The count must serve permanence." Marna's eldest grandchild whispered, "We are permanent." Ursuline lifted one hand without looking away from Godric. "No statements without a resident witness." Godric smiled. "Coaching residents already? Protecting them from being measured only when useful." Ethelred stepped closer to the window. His royal wolf shadow spread over the floorboards, charcoal black with a pale silver mane and a glowing crescent at its throat. It lowered near the reflected moon mark and watched. It did not open Marna's door. It did not count the children. It did not touch the map. That restraint mattered. It did not repair the count. "Produce Marna Bell's household form," Ethelred said. Godric opened a clean packet. The active census shows Widow Bell as temporary occupancy, pending relocation to her son's ward. No qualifying household. Marna's mouth tightened. "My son is buried behind street bridges." The room changed by one breath. Ursuline did not seize the packet. Clean packets could be prepared. Burials were less convenient. Record a contradiction. Address, moon door mark, resident name, clinic token, and red strike time preserved. Allocation for Larkspur Row must be held. Godric's voice softened. Mistress Hart's authority is under review for encouraging household inflation among unstable residents. The clerk glanced at Aethelred. The king did not answer quickly enough. Ursuline felt that pause like a door closing. If she certified the omission, food carts and clinic routes would leave the lane for a season. If she refused, Godric would call her the examiner who stole bread from counted children elsewhere. Either way, women would pay for the shape men preferred households to have. She chose the door. I refuse certification, Ursuline said. Marnabel's cottage remains disputed, occupied until route forms, tax receipts, utilities, market purchases, birth and death records, and allocation math are reviewed. Aethelred looked at her then, truly looked, and the force of his attention was dangerous. Attraction moved between them, bright and unwanted, made bitter by the empty clinic schedule under his hand. Hold district allocation until sunset, he said. Sunset gives Chancellor Vale time to move maps and forms, Ursuline replied. Seal the women's lane packet now. Godric laughed quietly. She speaks as though a lane of unsettled women outweighs a kingdom's count. No, Ursuline said. I speak as though a census should begin by admitting people exist. Outside, the silver mark on Marna's door flared once. Then 3 more doors along Larkspur Row began glowing against the empty census map. The 3 new moon marks made Larkspur Row look alive in a way the sealed census refused to admit. Women came out holding whatever the count had not valued. Tax receipts folded into aprons, water tallies tied with string, lamp oil accounts, market slips, clinic cards, baptism records, burial notices, ration losses, and children too hungry to stand still. No one shouted. Shouting gave officials permission to call a lane disorderly. The silence was worse. Ursuline stood beneath Marna Bell's glowing door and made a work table from 2 wash benches, 1 household at a time. Address first, resident names next, then tax, water, lamp, food, birth, death, clinic, and route history. Godric's clerk tried to collect the papers for safe registry custody. Ursuline closed her gloved hand over the first receipt. Resident. Held papers remain resident. Held. Aethelred, still inside the registry doorway, heard the sentence and did not contradict her. Godric did. This is how false households breed. 1 widow lends her tax slip to another, 1 sister claims a cousin, and famine stores empty before winter. Marna's granddaughter gripped the clinic token. Ursuline saw the child's lips tremble and chose method over anger. Marna Bell, Cottage 4, Larkspur Row, tax paid each quarter, water draw steady through the census window, lamp account active, market flour, beans, soap, and milk purchased weekly. Clinic token issued under this address. She matched dates with a small silver door key measuring charm at her belt, its edge marked in census columns. Tax week, utility week, enumeration week, allocation week. Human life made patterns even when clerks erased names. A widow named Selamos laid down a lamp oil book from door 6. 2 unmarried sisters, Bry and Catherine Vale, brought 1 water account with 2 signatures and a bread slip large enough for 3 adults. At door 9, a long-term female partnership had paid district tax under 1 name because the assessor's form had no line for the second woman, yet their market purchases showed 2 steady diets and a newborn niece taken in after a death. Temporary? Ursuline asked. No, Marna said. Hungry. By afternoon, the food cart that should have served Larkspur Row rolled past the end of the lane without stopping. The driver would not meet anyone's eyes. Allocation says 4 qualifying households, he muttered. There are 14 occupied doors, Ursuline said. Then take it up with the sealed count. The cart went on. That was the immediate consequence of a red strike. Not theory, not insult, but empty hands while bread moved towards Godric's map considered stable. Aethelred followed the cart with his gaze, and something in his face changed. Not enough. But enough that when Godric ordered the women separated for household inflation review, the king said, "They remain together." Godric's expression cooled. "Your Majesty risks encouraging coordinated fraud. I am witnessing the examiner's method." Ursuline looked at him. "From there." She pointed to the broken pump stone 10 paces away. Aethelred accepted the place without royal injury. His wolf shadow pooled around his boots, silver-maned and quiet, watching the doors instead of the papers. "Every resident chooses what to show," Ursuline said, so the lane and the king heard together. "No one signs a correction request, household statement, or witness answer without a copied notice and another resident present." Ursuline let herself register Aethelred's restraint. Limited respect, not trust. She continued working. Marna's tax receipts matched the registry collection seal. The water tally showed steady draw through all 4 census weeks. Lamp oil use rose the week Marna's youngest grandchild had fever, confirmed by the clinic card. Market slips showed flour quantities too small for a boarding house and too steady for a vacant cottage. Occupied household activity before, during, and after enumeration, Ursuline said, not temporary absence. Aethelred asked, "Can this prove exact residence?" "No. It proves the sealed count cannot call the door empty without answering these records." A boy from the registry arrived, with a notice nailed to a counting rod. "Residents consulting suspended examiner Hart may be reviewed for household inflation fraud and delayed ration correction." The ink was still wet. Godric smiled from the registry steps. "Necessary warning, inflated numbers steal from counted children." Ursuline pulled the notice free and pinned it to Marna's fence. "Now the threat has a date." Marna touched the words with one rough finger. "Will they cut the clinic longer?" "They already have," Ursuline said. "Now we prove why." She turned back to the sealed address slip Godric's clerk had dropped in the mud. Under the red strike, barely visible, was a hollow house code entered before the enumerator's route stamp should have existed. Ursuline checked the route schedule twice. The official enumeration of Larkspur Row had not been completed until 4th bell. Marna's cottage had been marked temporary at 2nd. She looked down the glowing lane and felt the case sharpen. They erased your household before the route was finished. Aethelred's summons arrived before breakfast, but Ursuline did not enter the map room alone. She brought Marna Bell, Selah Moss, Bree and Catron Vale, 2 resident witnesses from door 9, and every resident held paper wrapped in oilcloth. The room had been stripped by royal order. 1 long table, 1 sealed census map, 2 lamps, no throne, no council chairs, no painted motto about orderly households. Godric Vale had still found a way to make the place feel owned. His route packets stood in perfect towers beside a locked cabinet. Aethelred rose when the women entered. "Mistress Hart, you found a code, before route contradiction." "I found a household struck before the route could legally count it," Ursuline said. "We examined that with residents present." Godric sighed. "Or we reward a lane for staging its own census." Ursuline laid Marna's address slip beside the route schedule. Hollow, house code entered at 2nd bell. Larkspur Row route completed at 4th. Aethelred looked to Godric. "Explain." "Preliminary classification," Godric said. "An experienced clerk may mark suspected temporary arrangements before final reconciliation." "Not as sealed count," Ursuline said. Godric opened a gray folder. "Then let us discuss what the examiner omitted from her lane performance." Inside lay vacancy tags, temporary lodging forms, and relocation notices for several Larkspur doors. Marna's cottage was listed as pending move to her son's ward. Selah's house was marked seasonal wash lodging. Brye and Catron were merged into a cousin's male-headed household. Door 9 was listed as non-qualifying female partnership with dependent child in transit. The words were neat enough to starve a street. Marna's face hardened. My son is buried. Sella whispered, I sleep above my own stove. Ursuline lifted one dark slate glove. No resident answers until counsel or another resident witness is named. Chain challenge on these forms. Who collected them? What route? What time? Where are the original resident marks? Godric smiled. She challenges everything that proves her wrong. I challenge documents that appear after their absence becomes useful. Ethelred's hand moved toward the gray folder, then stopped before she had to speak. He lowered it beside his coat instead. The restraint was not trust, but it kept custody clean. His charcoal black wolf shadow gathered below the table, silver mane low, watching the route packets without touching map or paper. What access do you require? He asked. Ursuline faced him fully. You may order records opened. You may protect residents from intimidation. You may not take custody of their papers, speak my findings before I do, question residents without consent, separate women for household review, or treat cooperation as forgiveness. Godric's mouth thinned. Your Majesty cannot be ruled by an examiner under review. Aethelred did not look away from Ursuline. I can be bound by evidentiary safeguards created because my certified count harmed the people in this room. The admission shifted the air. Not enough to feed Marna's grandchildren. Not enough to return the skipped clinic bell. Enough to make the women uncurl their fingers from the papers in their laps. Enough to make Godric's next move sharper. Then call your witness, Godric said. Let the roots speak. Tamsin Reed entered with rain on her enumerator's cloak and ink stains beneath her nails. She was not grand, not polished, not frightened enough for Godric's liking. Her leather satchel was patched twice and sealed at the buckle with common twine. Ursuline placed the route schedule before her. Larkspur Row. Fourth bell completion, Tamsin said. I began at the pump, ended at the broken laurel wall. Did you visit Marna Bell's cottage? Yes. Widow, 2 grandchildren, 1 back room rented to a seamstress during market weeks, not vacant. Door 6, Salamos. Permanent. Doors 7 and 8, Bry and Catrin Vale. Sisters. Shared water account, separate beds, same kitchen. Household. Door 9, Tamsin glanced at the women by the wall. Mira and Joan Ash, long partnership. Infant niece taken in after Joan's sister died. Godric stood. The enumerator offers social sympathy, not qualifying law. She offers root facts, Ursuline said. Whether law values them is the question your forms tried to avoid. Ethelred turned to Tamsin. Did you submit household forms? Yes, Majesty. Completed, signed, and bundled by door order. Godric tapped the sealed packet. The official packet contains no such qualifying forms. Tamsin's expression changed. She crossed to the backing sheet beneath the route bundle and bent close. May I? Ursula nodded, but did not let her touch the page until the neutral clerk marked the motion. Tamsin tilted the sheet toward the lamp. There. Her voice went rough. My route ink bled through when I numbered the forms. Cottage 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. The impressions are here. The forms themselves were gone. Godric said, ink shadows can come from discarded drafts. Tamsin shook her head. No, this is final route ink. She looked at Ursuline, then at the king, whose count had swallowed a lane. Several completed household forms are missing from the sealed packet, but their ink remains on the backing sheet. Tamsin Reed's route ink made the missing forms feel present in the room. Ursuline did not celebrate. A missing household form could still be called a clerical loss, a draft discarded, an enumerator's confusion. She needed the life around the missing paper, not only its ghost. Seal the backing sheet under witness glass, she said. Then bring tax rolls, water ledgers, lamp accounts, market tallies, birth and death registers, erased form fragments, and the allocation schedule for Larkspur District. Godric's objection came dressed as order. Those records belong to separate offices. Mixing them creates false confidence. No, Ursuline said. Separating them created false absence. Aethelred ordered the records opened. Clerks carried in books that smelled of damp leather, lamp smoke, and the dust of rooms where ordinary hunger waited for official arithmetic. Ursuline set each source in a separate lane because Godric liked confusion folded into one polished packet. Marna watched from the wall with her clinic token in both hands. Bry and Katrin sat shoulder to shoulder as if a ledger might split them apart. Ursuline began with Marna. Tax paid, water drawn, lamp oil purchased during the fever week, market slips for flour, beans, and milk, baptism entry for the youngest grandchild, burial entry for Marna's son. Not pending relocation to a son's ward, Ursuline said. The son is dead, the household continues, and the district used her tax while refusing her count. Ethelred's eyes moved to the burial record. The pale wolf light around them dimmed into something more human. Godric folded his hands. A household may continue socially and still fail census qualification. Then say the rule out loud, Ursuline answered. Say a woman may pay tax, draw water, feed children, bury kin, and still not count unless a man makes the door permanent. The room went very still. She moved to Selah Moss. The utility ledger showed steady water through the census window. The market tally showed soap and meal bought in patterns too regular for seasonal lodging. A neighboring baker, called by Ursuline from the resident witness line, confirmed Selah collected bread every second morning and paid with washing money earned from 3 stable clients. Godric's mouth tightened. A baker cannot define a household. No, Ursuline said, but he can prove the house was not empty. Doors 7 and 8 came next. Bry and Katrin's single water account had been used against them, merged into a cousin's mail-headed address. Yet their lamp account showed 2 rooms burning at night. Their tax receipt named Bry as payer. A death notice showed Katrin had taken in their niece after her mother died during the counting month. Tamsin leaned over the backing sheet. I wrote them as a household because I found them as one. Ursuline placed one erased fragment beside the route impression. A torn corner bore the same door number and Tamsin's ink curve scraped thin but not gone. The form existed after route completion. Godric spoke quickly. Fragments prove handling, not final status. Exactly, Ursuline said. So we ask who changed status after handling. Ethelred stood at the far side of the table, keeping the boundary she had set. His left forearm scar showed where his sleeve had pulled back. I certified the sealed count because false households once broke a winter storehouse, he said. Godric's eyes sharpened with relief, but Ursuline did not interrupt. A famine year, Ethelred continued. 3 grain agents doubled households on the East rolls. They invented cousin rooms, widow annexes, apprentice beds. By thaw, true families arrived with ration seals and no food remained. I broke a storehouse gate when the riot trapped children inside. His voice did not ask for comfort. That was why Ursuline could answer plainly. Fraud taught you to fear numbers, she said. Godric taught you to fear women's doors. Aethelred accepted the strike. Yes. Not enough for Marna's missed food cart. Not enough for the clinic bell that would not come. But the admission moved responsibility from old ghosts to the living signature in the room. Godric recovered by turning practical. Scarcity remains. If temporary female arrangements are counted as full households, stable districts lose food, clinic days, and council balance. Ursuline opened the allocation schedule. There lay the changed meaning. Not merely who had been counted, but who profited when counting stopped. Larkspur's food allotment had been reduced by 32 loaves and 4 bean sacks. Its clinic day was reassigned to Northgate Ward. Its school meal supplement was cut. One partial council share moved to Ironwell, a ward whose households had no matching population rise. Resources were not saved, Ursuline said. They were redirected. Godric's stillness became more dangerous than objection. She laid 6 lanes across the table: Marna Bell, Moss, Bry and Catherine Vale, Mira and Joan Ash, Old Nella Croft, and unmarried midwife Pearl Sin. Different door types. Different resident patterns. Same route completion by Tamsin. Same tax or utility continuity. Same erased form evidence. Same post-route alteration. And beside each, the same hollow house code. Het home. Entered after enumerator visit, before allocation calculation, and before any correction notice reached the resident. Aethelred leaned forward, then stopped short of the papers. H0 means empty? Officially, Ursuline said, checking the allocation key once more. Hollow household. Temporary, unstable, no allocation weight. Marna made a broken sound. Hollow? Ursuline looked at the 6 glowing addresses reflected in the window glass. No, she said. Occupied, counted, and then hollowed by code. She turned the next allocation page. 6 more women-led homes carried H0 before food, clinic, and council reductions were calculated. By midday, H0 had left the map room and entered stomachs. The second food cart rolled past Larkspur Row with its canvas tied down. Marna Bell stood at her gate with the clinic token still in her fist, watching 32 loaves and 4 bean sacks turn toward Ironwell. Her youngest grandchild asked whether being hollow meant bread could not see them. Ursuline wrote the sentence down because cruelty hid best when it sounded childish. At Northgate, the nurse station opened with Larkspur's reassigned clinic bell. At the schoolyard, Pearlson's niece was told the meal supplement had been corrected according to district count. Corrected meant removed. Corrected meant a child carrying a slate and no breakfast. Aethelred watched the reports arrive one by one. He did not speak over them. That restraint had become a pattern, but patterns did not fill cupboards. The women still looked at his moon-silver clasps and saw the sealed count that had sent food and medicine elsewhere. Godric understood that damage could be used twice. By afternoon, notices appeared on the pump, the market gate, and Street Bridget's wall. Examiner Hart encourages household inflation. False counts steal bread from children. Residents in unstable arrangements may face ration correction delays if they obstruct review. Marna read the last line slowly. Obstruct means us. It means they want you frightened apart, Ursuline said. Stay where your neighbors can witness. She refused the royal guards Aethelred offered before Godric could make them look like custody. No soldiers at doors. No royal clerk alone with resident papers. No interviews without another resident witness. No relief delivered through Godric's office as if hunger were evidence tampering. Aethelred's jaw tightened. Then tell me what protection does not frighten the lane. The question mattered because it asked for limits instead of gratitude. Emergency food through parish kitchens, recorded by address. Clinic hours restored as medical necessity, not royal favor. Public notice that speaking with me cannot delay correction. And no separation of widows, sisters, partners, or lodgers for household status review. He turned to his scribe. Write it. Godric arrived while the ink was wet, carrying a blue census packet sealed with the chancellor's mark. Before your majesty discredits an entire count over moonlit doors, examine what Mistress Hart has hidden. Inside lay vacancy tags and temporary lodging forms for the 6 new H0 households. Better ones. The first packet had been stiff and clean. These bore mud on their corners, resident-style thumb smears, and corrected dates that answered nearly every weakness Ursuline had named in the map room. Sella's form described a seasonal wash contract. Bry and Catherine's merged address now included the cousin's tax number. Mira and Joan's file claimed the infant niece had been in transit between households. Pearlson's midwife room was labeled public service space, not residence. Ursuline felt the cold precision of a trap, learning her method. Aethelred reached toward the packet, then stopped before she raised a hand. She hated needing his restraint. She hated more that his certification had given Godric time to improve lies against hungry people. Chain challenge, she said. New packet, chancellor custody, no resident witness, no route collector named, corrections added after my objections, and presented by the office whose allocation gains from H0. Godric smiled. Or the residents changed stories once they knew how you would measure them. Marna's face went gray. Ursuline did not comfort her first. She recorded the accusation, the seal, the packet cord, the time, and the exact households named. Comfort without record would leave the women defenseless later. Then she rebuilt away from the poisoned packet. At door 6, the baker swore Selah had bought bread through every census week. At doors 7 and 8, lamp use showed 2 occupied sleeping rooms after the alleged merge. At door 9, the midwife who delivered the infant niece confirmed the child had been carried to Mira and Joan before Tamsin's visit and remained there. Pearlson's herb purchases and night calls proved her rear room was both work and home. Ursuline pinned each testimony to allocation math. 1 omitted door meant fewer loaves. 3 meant a clinic day gone. 6 shifted council weight. 12 could silence a district until the next count. Aethelred stood at the edge of the lane, not among the doors, while his wolf shadow lowered across the stones. How many more before the allocation cannot be corrected this season? Ursuline looked at the schedule Godric had not meant her to see. The final seasonal release was set for dawn. Once issued, food routes, clinic contracts, school meals, and council apportionment would lock for the winter quarter. Godric's voice came from behind them, mild as a closed door. Scarcity cannot wait for every unconventional household to debate its identity. Ursuline faced him with ink on her gloves and hunger in the lane behind her. Residents are not a debate. He handed her the dawn order. Final seasonal allocation release. H0 corrections deferred pending fraud review. Marna's granddaughter asked, "Does that mean hollow all winter?" Ursuline read the seal once. At dawn, the undercount would become the kingdom's food, clinic, and council plan. Before the dawn bell, Godric Vale locked the map room and sent the clinic cart out of Larkspur by the North Road. Ursuline found the nurse at the turning bridge with her medicine chest already strapped shut. Larkspur's bell was removed from the route, the woman said, ashamed enough to whisper. Chancellor's order. Final allocation begins early for disputed districts. Behind them, Marnabel's granddaughter coughed into her sleeve. Godric had not waited for dawn. He had made dawn move. At the registry steps, a clerk read Ursuline's suspension aloud. Her authority was withdrawn for suspected household inflation, obstruction of allocation, and misuse of moon door reactions. The sealed census maps were locked in the cabinet. Tamsin Reed's route originals were removed for verification. The improved vacancy packet was entered as primary evidence. For one breath, the lane looked at Ursuline as if paper could strip her hands from their doors. She lifted her voice. "I am suspended from the registry. I am not suspended from knowing how to count." Aethelred arrived as the final food wagons lined beneath the allocation arch. He wore no ceremonial chain, only the black coat with moon-silver clasps and the scar on his left forearm bare, where his sleeve had been torn in haste. Open the map room. Godric bowed from the closed doors. Your Majesty, early release is lawful when fraud review threatens winter supply. If you delay stable wards for a suspended examiner's lane, you will own every hungry child outside Larkspur as well. Aethelred looked to Ursuline, not to the lock. He had learned not to rescue evidence by seizing it. What can be stopped without taking this from you? Remove guards from household doors, she said. Open the lane to public witness. Order the allocation clock read aloud. Seal the map cabinet against alteration, not review. Restore the clinic cart as medical necessity, and record that your certified count allowed occupied homes to be treated as temporary before independent correction. His eyes flashed silver. Scribe. The words were written on registry paper, under his name, while women watched from thresholds Godric's count had hollowed. Aethelred did not soften the sentence. He signed it. Godric's jaw tightened. Fine ink does not create households. No, Ursuline said. People do. She abandoned the poisoned packet and the missing root originals. If Godric controlled the maps, she would count where he could not edit, at the doors. Marna stood first. Her cottage door still held a fading silver mark from the night before. Ursuline placed the sealed address slip, the tax receipt, the water tally, the clinic token, and the burial record near the threshold, but did not touch the door. Moon doors prove one thing, she told the growing crowd. Occupied residents at this address were omitted from the sealed census. They do not prove household law, exact numbers, relationship type, service amount, or who erased the form. Human records and witnesses must finish the count. Moonlight, pale before sunrise, touched the panel. The household mark bloomed again, bright enough that even the food cart driver crossed himself. Marna did not smile. Will that bring bread? Not alone, Ursuline said. Now the tax and water speak. The tax collector, dragged from bed by Aethelred's order but standing outside royal custody, confirmed Marna's payments. The water reader confirmed steady draw. A midwife confirmed the youngest grandchild's fever visit. Tamsin, holding only her resident copy because the originals were gone, testified she had counted the cottage at fourth bell. Aethelred stood at the pump stone, far from the papers, with his wolf shadow lowered behind him. It watched the door glow. It touched nothing. Door 6 glowed next for Selah Moss. The baker swore to her bread purchases. The lamp reader showed oil used every census week. Doors 7 and 8 answered for Brigg and Katrin. 2 rooms lit, 1 account used, 2 women living. Door 9 glowed for Mira and Joan while the midwife held up the infant niece's birth and death chain, proof that a child had moved from one grieving household into another before Tamsin's visit. Each door mark widened the lane. Each human witness made it harder to call silver sympathy. Then Ursuline brought out the allocation copy, smuggled by a council clerk who would not give his name until Aethelred promised protection without reward. The copy showed Larkspur's food, clinic, school meal, and council share reduced after H0 was entered. Beside it, Ironwell and Northgate gained the exact measures Larkspur lost. Scarcity was not protected, Ursuline said. It was reassigned. Godric came down the steps. Favored wards? Stable wards. Counted wards. Wards not inventing households at sunrise. The moon marks flared along the lane as if the doors had heard him. Aethelred turned to the gathered residents. My certification let that word, temporary, stand between occupied homes and the resources owed to their district. It let H0 travel farther than a person's voice. I record that fault before release proceeds. The scribe repeated it aloud. Not forgiveness, not repair, but the first public stone pulled from Godric's wall. The allocation clock struck once. Inside the locked map cabinet, something hummed. Every moon mark on Larkspur Road dimmed, then pointed its silver crescent toward the registry window. Behind the glass, the sealed empty census map glowed from within the cabinet. One door mark burned on a street no official route admitted existed at all. The glowing mark inside the locked cabinet silenced even the allocation clock. Ursuline raised her hand. Seal, lock, witness line, and time first. Godric's fingers tightened around his chancellor's key. A moon stain on parchment does not create a street. No, Ursuline said, but it may show where your count buried one. Aethelred stayed back. Neutral clerk opens it. Tamsin Reed reads the map. No census officer touches it alone. The wax broke under witness. Inside, the sealed, empty census map hummed like a door under a fist. A pale crescent mark burned on a narrow lane drawn behind the old dye works. Tamsin went still. Ash Yard, Godric snapped. Not a residential route. It was assigned, Tamsin said, then removed before I walked it. I was told the households were folded into Ironwell. Ursuline checked the allocation copy. Ironwell had gained food, clinic hours, school meals, and a council fraction. Ash Yard had no route, no count, and no appeal notice because officially it had no households to appeal. Pearl Sin stepped forward. Women lived there. Dye rinse workers, widows renting rooms, 2 sisters with children, and a long partnership everyone calls cousins because the forms have no better word. Godric lifted his voice. Unofficial lodging near a dangerous works is not a district household. Ursuline faced the crowd. Then we walk. The public inquiry moved before dawn fully broke. No guards went ahead. Aethelred walked behind Ursuline, far enough that no woman at a door had to mistake royal presence for permission or threat. His charcoal black wolf shadow followed low along the stones, silver mane bright, watching thresholds without touching them. Ash Yard was not empty. At the first door, a widow opened with a baby on one hip and dye burns on one wrist. Moonlight caught the warped panel, and one household mark bloomed silver. At the next, 2 unmarried sisters stood with 3 children behind them. Their door glowed. At the third, 2 women who had shared wages and rent for 11 years clasped hands only after Ursuline said, "Relationship type is not being examined. Occupancy is." That door glowed too. Godric tried to make the magic larger than it was so he could dismiss it. Pretty doors, no entitlement. Correct, Ursuline said. A door proves occupied residence omitted from the sealed census. Human proof decides the handling. She set records on an overturned die crate. The tax collector confirms small levy under the yard number. The water reader confirms steady draw. The lamp seller named weekly oil. The market keeper confirmed oat, milk, soap, and coal purchases. Pearl Sin confirmed fever calls. Birth and burial clerks confirmed residence during the census month. Tamsin unfolded her resident copy of the original route board. Ash Yard was on my first assignment, removed after chancellor correction. Ursuline placed erased form fragments beside it. Torn corners bore Ash Yard door numbers and the same ink curve as Larkspur's backing sheet. Forms existed, routes existed, residents existed. Then H0 removed them. A junior allocation clerk stepped from behind the food wagons, paper shaking in both hands. Chancellor's correction office sent the H0 sheet before final calculations. Ash Yard and Larkspur reductions went into Ironwell and North Gate. Godric turned on her. You stole allocation papers. She stands under royal protection without reward, Aethelred said, still not between Ursuline and the evidence. The clerk looked to Ursuline. The council fraction moved first, then clinic days. Food was adjusted after. That changed motive. It was not only bread, it was representation, the power to argue for the next bread. Ursuline spoke each link clearly. Moon door marks prove occupied residents were omitted. Tax, water, lamp, market, birth, death, and clinic records prove continuous presence. Tamsin's testimony and route remnants prove forms existed before sealing. H0 timing proves post-route recoding. Allocation copies prove food, clinics, school meals, and council share were reduced and redirected. She turned to Aethelred. That combination proves a census undercount. Godric's face hardened. If you restore every widow's cottage, unmarried women's room, and female partnership, stable wards lose stores before winter. This examiner will break your famine protections with sentiment. Aethelred looked down Ashyard, where silver marks burned on doors his census had refused to see. When he spoke, he addressed the residents. My certification made living households disappear from Fanehold. I accepted household status as a gate to food, clinics, school meals, and council voice. Under that judgment, occupied doors were called hollow, and residents standing before me were denied bread, medicine, and representation. Godric said, "You will destabilize the realm." "No," Aethelred said. "I will destabilize the lie." The break came quietly. Census clerks named correction drawers. A route apprentice admitted Godric's office ordered women-led homes bundled as temporary before allocation. The water reader pointed to utility totals ignored in the sealed count. A council clerk named wards that gained fractions without population rise. Aethelred removed the moon's silver chain carrying his census certification authority and placed it on the die crate beside Ursuline's records. Godric Vale is removed from census custody, he said. The final allocation release is suspended. Emergency food and clinic service return today to all disputed omitted streets. A new independent census begins under resident-held receipts, open route records, and no household status test. Deprived districts will be compensated and council shares reviewed. The women of Ashyard did not cheer. They held children, ration slips, and one another. Relief was too heavy to lift quickly. Aethelred stopped at the distance Ursuline had set. I will not ask forgiveness for a count I have only begun to repair. Good, she said. Repair has begun, Ursuline continued. But personal trust cannot be discussed until every occupied household is counted without marital status, male headship, partnership approval, or permanence tests. Behind her, the silver marks on Ashyard and Larkspur Row flared together, and the food wagons turned away from Ironwell toward the doors the census had called empty. By full morning, the food wagons did not pass Larkspur Row. They stopped. Ursuline stood beside Marnabel's gate while the driver counted loaves, beans, milk tins, and coal vouchers into resident-held lists, not Godric Vale's hollow house columns. A nurse reopened the clinic cart under the laurel wall. Pearlson's niece received a school meal token before anyone asked who headed her household. Ashyard sent 3 women with baskets, and no clerk asked whether dye rooms were permanent enough for hunger. The repair table was set in the street between the glowing doors and the registry steps. Ursuline chose that place because every person who had been called temporary could hear the rules being changed. Resident presence first, she told the new independent enumerators. Names by consent, address, current occupants, services used, no marital status test, no male headship test, no permanence judgment before counting. Relationship type is not allocation evidence unless the resident offers it for contact purposes. Aethelred stood beyond the pump stone without the moon silver certification chain. The missing chain made him look less armored, not less dangerous. His scarred forearm remained visible when he signed the emergency orders. Food routes restored, clinic days returned, school meals recalculated, deprived districts compensated, council fractions suspended pending review, and a full independent census ordered with resident-held count receipts. "Under my name," he said when the scribe hesitated over the accountability line. Ursuline read it aloud before accepting the page. "Certified count, wrongfully treated occupied women. Led households as temporary, reducing food, clinics, school meals, and council voice." Aethelred met her eyes. "Leave it plain. It stays plain." Godric's system did not fall in one dramatic crash. It came apart in procedures, which was better. Route boards were opened. H0 was banned from allocation weight. Correction windows began at resident notice, not chancellor filing. Utility cross-checks were required before any vacancy code. Erased form fragments were copied under witness glass. Enumerators kept duplicate route receipts with district residents. Council calculations had to show where each moved fraction came from. Moon doors were not made rulers. Ursuline repeated that until even excited children could say it back. A door mark proved only that occupied residents had been omitted from the sealed count. It did not count exact people, decide family worth, assign bread, or name the person who erased a form. Human records, witnesses, and resident consent finished the proof. Marna Bell was the first corrected household. Her grandchildren watched solemnly while Tamsin Reed wrote the names Marna aloud and left blank the ones she did not. Salamos kept her own water tally copy. Bree and Katrin Vale received separate contact lines without being split from one kitchen. Mira and Joan Ash recorded their niece as present without proving their partnership. In Ashyard, the dye-burned widow with the baby signed with a thumb mark beside a witness she chose. Every corrected door made the map less clean and more honest. By dusk, Larkspur's clinic bell rang again. Ashyard's food cart arrived with a driver who took off his cap before the first threshold. The school kitchen reopened a supplemental pot. A council clerk posted notice that the disputed fraction would not sit with Ironwell until the independent count was complete. Ursuline filed her suspension notice as evidence, not trash. She filed Aethelred's signed responsibility beside it. Systems needed memory more than revenge. Only after the first corrected allocation reached Larkspur and Ashyard did Aethelred send a request through her restored office. One recorded private conversation. No carriage, no moon garden, no witnesses removed for romance. She granted 12 minutes in the plain map room, with the door open. Aethelred entered without chain, guards, or apology polished for admiration. "The independent census has authority. Godric's maps are under witness custody. If more omitted streets appear, services go first and reputation waits. That is the beginning of repair," Ursuline said. "And personally?" he asked, quiet enough not to become pressure. She looked at him then, at the beauty that had once stood beside an empty map and the man now learning to be measured by the doors he restored. Desire existed. So did memory. She would not let one erase the other. "One conversation has occurred," she said. "After every household in the first undercount district has a corrected receipt, you may request another. I choose the room, the time, and the distance." Aethelred bowed. "At your count." Outside, moonlight softened across Larkspur Row. The silver marks faded from the doors, leaving ordinary thresholds behind, and the clinic bell rang where the census could no longer pretend women were not home.